This movie covers subtopic 2.3, Part 1, Flows of Energy, under the main topic of ESS Topic 2, Ecosystems and Ecology. Topic 2.3, Part 2, covers flows of matter. The significant idea number 1 for this subtopic is that ecosystems are linked together by energy and matter flows. In this movie, we're focusing on energy. Recollect that almost all energy that drives processes on Earth comes from the sun. Solar radiation is made up of visible wavelength light and those wavelengths that humans cannot see, including infrared and ultraviolet light. As solar radiation, or insolation, enters Earth's atmosphere, some energy becomes unavailable for ecosystems, as the energy is absorbed by inorganic matter or reflected back into the atmosphere. Pathways of radiation through the atmosphere involve a loss of radiation through reflection and absorption. Some 60% of radiation is intercepted by atmospheric gases and dust particles. Nearly all the ultraviolet light is absorbed by the ozone. Most of the infrared light, or heat, is absorbed by carbon dioxide, clouds, and water vapor in the atmosphere. Looking at the right side of this image, both ultraviolet and visible light energy, short wavelengths, are converted to heat energy, or long wavelengths. The systems of the biosphere are dependent on the amount of energy reaching the ground, not the amount of energy reaching the outer atmosphere. This amount of energy reaching the ground varies according to the time of day, the season, the amount of cloud cover, and other factors. For example, in June through August, the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, giving it summer because of the increased solar radiation. Likewise, in November through February, the southern hemisphere receives increased solar radiation when it is tilted towards the sun, giving it summertime. Most of the energy that reaches Earth is not used to power living systems. It is reflected from soil, water, or vegetation, or absorbed and re-radiated as heat. Of the energy reaching Earth's surface, about 35% is reflected back into space by ice, snow, water, and land. Some energy is absorbed and heats up the land and the seas. Of all the energy coming in, only about 1 to 4% of it is available to plants on the surface of Earth. Pathways of energy through an ecosystem, so the energy that's reached Earth, include conversion of light energy to chemical energy, transfer of chemical energy from one trophic level to another with varying efficiencies, overall conversion of ultraviolet and visible light to heat energy by an ecosystem, and re-radiation of heat energy to the atmosphere. Let's discuss the first one of these, conversion of light energy to chemical energy. Conversion of light energy to chemical energy occurs during the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use light energy to convert it to chemical energy, storing it in bonds of sugar or glucose. In this slide, you can see 3 illustrations of the conversion of light energy into chemical energy, or photosynthesis. Now let's discuss the fact that the transfer of chemical energy occurs from one trophic level to another with varying efficiencies. The transformation of solar energy into chemical energy, if you recall, occurs in trophic level 1, the trophic level of producers. Then the transfer of this chemical energy through the process of consumption takes place from one trophic level to another, again with varying efficiencies. Typically, this transfer occurs with about 10% efficiency between trophic levels. 90% of the starting energy is unavailable to the next trophic level because that energy is used for processes such as movement, growth, reproduction, and of course, respiration. Sometimes this efficiency might be 5% or 7%, or perhaps it would be 12 or 15% efficient, but the energy transfer is generally around 10% efficient between trophic levels. Pathways of energy through an ecosystem also include the overall conversion of ultraviolet and visible light to heat energy by an ecosystem through cellular respiration. Recall our discussion on the second law of thermodynamics and how it directs energy flow through an ecosystem. The process of cellular respiration is highly inefficient, resulting in a huge percentage of energy being converted to heat energy and then lost to the environment. Thus, a pathway of energy through an ecosystem includes this overall conversion of ultraviolet and visible light energy to heat energy by an ecosystem. Now let's discuss the pathway of re-radiation of heat energy to the atmosphere. Re-radiation of heat energy to the atmosphere is illustrated on the right-hand side of this image. The re-radiated energy, the heat energy, the long wavelength, is trapped by the greenhouse gases to give Earth its comfortable average temperatures. This is called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is a normal component of Earth's processes. It is necessary to maintain the comfortable temperature that makes Earth habitable for all of us, the greenhouse effect. However, human activity results in an enhanced greenhouse effect. Basically, the added greenhouse gases added to the atmosphere from our activity result in more long wavelength heat energy being trapped by the atmosphere, causing warmer temperatures and climate change. This is discussed in much more detail in topic 7. The conversion of energy into biomass for a given period of time is measured as productivity. In other words, the conversion of plant material or plant energy eaten by the caterpillar into new mass or growth of the caterpillar is called productivity. There is also a new vocabulary on this slide, namely biomass. Biomass is the living mass of an organism or organisms, and it also sometimes refers to the dry mass. This is a biomass pyramid of a terrestrial ecosystem. The biomass of producers is at the maximum. The biomass of the next trophic level, i.e. the primary consumers, is less than the producers. The biomass of the next higher trophic level, the secondary consumers, is less than the primary consumers. And at the top, high trophic level has the very least amount of biomass in this ecosystem. Assimilation is the process through which an organism incorporates nutrients, such as glucose, from outside its body to the more complex structure needed inside of it. In the case of this caterpillar, it is the process through which it incorporates nutrients from the leaf, from the outside of the body, into growth, or getting bigger, and performing necessary metabolic processes that require energy obtained through cellular respiration. These all occur inside of the caterpillar. Net primary productivity, or NPP, is calculated by subtracting respiratory losses from gross primary productivity. This is the formula, NPP equals GPP minus R. The idea of NPP is illustrated here, right? Glucose is produced during photosynthesis by the plant. This is the gross primary production. However, some glucose is used to supply energy to drive cellular processes or respiration, right? So some of this glucose is taken away in the process of respiration. Therefore, the remaining glucose available is laid down as new material or biomass of the plant. This is the net primary production, the new mass of the plant. So I just mentioned plants, and now with regard to animals, or higher up on the trophic level, Gross secondary productivity is the total energy or biomass assimilated by consumers and is calculated by subtracting the mass of fecal loss from the mass of food eaten, right? So the gross secondary production is the food eaten by the animal or the consumer minus the fecal loss, right? The waste that just goes out of the animal, doesn't contribute anything to the animal. And the net secondary productivity is calculated by subtracting respiratory losses from GSP, right? So net secondary productivity is equal to GSP minus R. And remember, GSP is the food intaken by, subtracted by the fecal loss. So NSP is food intaken minus fecal loss minus respiration. The NSP then is the actual mass or energy gain in a specific time for a specific area. You need to be able to analyze quantitative models of flows of energy and matter, to construct quantitative models of flows of energy or matter for a given data, analyze the efficiency of energy transfers through a system, calculate the values of both gross primary productivity and net primary productivity from given data, right? This is with regard to the plants. Calculate the values of gross secondary productivity and net secondary productivity from given data. Now we're talking about consumers. And discuss human impacts on energy flows. So let's do a few calculations to get you started. We'll do a lot more practice in class. The figure below shows the energy flow through a small portion of a grassland ecosystem. The figures are given in kilojoules per meter squared per year. Always keep track of units. Stop the video and complete the following. State 2 strengths of the model. State 2 limitations of the model. A couple of strengths of this model. It does simplify a complex system, and it illustrates energy flows in the grassland and provides a place from which predictions can be made. A couple of limitations. Not all flows are represented, so it's oversimplified. And maybe it's not accurate, depending on the time of year the data was collected. Using this same diagram, can you complete the following? What is the gross primary production of grasses and herbs? Make sure to always show your work. Stop the movie and attempt the calculation. Well, we know that the formula is NPP equals GPP minus R. So in order to calculate the GPP, we just rearrange the equation to NPP plus R. And then we take the values from the diagram and we come up with 24 times 10 to the 6 kilojoules per meter squared per year. Make sure that this makes sense to you. Here is another practice problem. What is the net secondary production of the seed-eating birds? Again, stop the movie and attempt the calculation. So you know the formula, NSP equals GSP minus R. You just have to figure out, where do these numbers come from? Remember, we talked about the fact that then the GSP is the food eaten minus the fecal loss minus R. And if you look here, here's the food eaten, and then we have the respiration and fecal loss combined here. So you need to be able to extract that information and apply it to the formula. And you should come up with this. Again, make sure that these numbers make sense to you. Stop the movie and attempt this problem. What is the net secondary production efficiency of the field mice? Here are the field mice. So you need to look at the total incoming and what percentage of that is your outgoing, right? Your net secondary production. So again, here are the field mice. We know that the net secondary productivity is 2,000, and the gross secondary productivity, like the incoming to this, is 116 times 10 to the third. You do the math and you get a 1.7% efficiency in secondary production of field mice. You need to be comfortable doing these kind of calculations using data provided for you. Additionally, you need to be able to generate these kind of diagrams with data provided for you. Again, we will do plenty of practice in class. Make sure also to find as many practice problems as you can to practice, whether in your text or through Cognigy or in thinking. In addition to be able to performing these calculations, you need to discuss the human impacts on energy flows. First, you need to understand that maximum sustainable yield is the largest crop or catch that can be taken from the stock of a species, like the forest or a shoal of fish, without depleting the stock. Taken away is the increase in production of the stock, while leaving the stock to reproduce again. It is the equivalent to the NPP or the NSP of a system. Stop the movie to complete this practice problem. If a local group wanted to start a snake farm and planned to catch field mice from 1 square kilometer of grassland to feed the snakes, what would be the maximum sustainable yield of field mice the group could capture each year? Maximum sustainable yield is the equivalent to the NSP of the field mice in a square kilometer per each month. Well, we know that the NSP of field mice is 2,000 kilojoules per meter squared per year. Thus, the MSY in a kilometer per month would be 2,000 kilojoules per meter squared per year. We know times 1,000 meters squared in a square kilometer, right? So now we have kilojoules per kilometer, and we know that in 1 year there are 12 months. So if you work out the units, you can see that now we're left with kilojoules per kilometer squared per month. Again, you need to be comfortable with these kind of calculations. So the final answer is 167 times 10 to the 2 kilojoules worth of mice every month from 1 kilometer squared area is the maximum sustainable yield that this local group could catch. A process, effect, or activity derived from humans is known as anthropogenic. When humans have an influence on an ecosystem, be it farming or living within it, we tend to simplify that ecosystem and make it less diverse. Look at this example of deforestation of the rainforest in Iguaçu National Park in Brazil in order to plant crops. This is much more biodiverse than this. Farming practices are aimed at maximizing NPP of the organisms we grow to maximize profit. Practices include killing pests, getting rid of weeds, growing larger crops, and growing crops resistant to pests. All farming practices require an energy subsidy, which is the additional energy that we have to put into the system above that which comes from the sun's energy. This includes human labor, animal labor, machines using fuel to power tractors and plows, to pump water, to make fertilizers and chemicals, and to transport crop. As the human population increases, the people need to be fed. This requires more and more sophistication of farming methods, and thus higher energy subsidies. Where does this energy come from? Remember the first law of thermodynamics, that energy just can't be created. Energy consumption in agriculture includes the farm equipment, both the manufacture and the usage of it, fertilizer production, processing, packaging, and transportation of those crops, and feed production for animal agriculture. And all of these require the major use of fossil fuels. Thus, energy subsidies in agriculture mostly come from fossil fuels. And that energy must keep flowing. Blocking energy from the sun would result in plant death and no photosynthesis. Likewise, stopping energy subsidies in agriculture would also result in major decreases in NPP and then starvation of people. We need to be aware of resiliency. Our monocultures, single species crops, are not as resilient as the forests and grasslands we removed in order to grow them. And if these crops then fail, what are the consequences? Here is a summary of this subtopic 2.3 Part 1, Flows of Energy. This ends the movie for IBESS topic 2.3 Part 1, Flows of Energy, under the main topic of IB ESS Topic 2, Ecology and Ecosystems. Topic 2.3 Part 2 covers flows of matter. The slides were created by me, Dr. Nina Markham. Images are courtesy of Creative Commons unless otherwise indicated, with a citation under the image. If all images on a slide are from the same source, the source is simply cited at the bottom of the slide. Another resource for you is your IBESS textbook, whether in hardback form or online such as Cognity. Thank you for listening.